Thursday, everybody. I hope you're having a good day so far, and I hope you're having a good week. Today's episode, I am focusing on one subject and one subject only, and it was brought to my attention a couple days ago. My dad asked me if I had heard about it, and so I decided to look into it, and it's actually quite terrifying to think about this. And so I thought, since really nobody's talking about it, the only place at the time when I was looking it up that really was talking about it was The Guardian. And so I want to talk about it and let more people know. But as always, first we have to start with our daily promise. So today's is: the Lord will not suffer the soul of the righteous to famish, but he casteth away the substance of the wicked. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 3. Reflection. Take confidence in this, dear believer. In the very suffering of the righteous lies the mystery of gospel victory. Sure enough, Christ's church is sore pressed upon this earth, just as even he was for a servant, just as even he was for a servant is not greater than his master. By his righteous suffering, our eternal victory was bought, and by our suffering for righteousness' sake, we glory in that same victory. Though in our days upon this earth we may indeed perish from starvation, that is not an end which we should fear. We ought look forward to the heavenly consummation of our lives, when at long last we will be truly free from famishment, when at long last we will no longer hold to the promises of unshakable victory by faith alone, but will apprehend such by unfettered sight. O come, Lord Jesus, come. I am of that belief. I go back and forth because sometimes I'm so ready for Jesus to come back and just get out of this ridiculous, crazy world that we live in. But then I always falter and think about people I know who are not saved and that they would be left behind, and uh, most most especially my children, and then my family. But I do worry about my kids. Now, some of my kids are not even old enough to understand, and that's fine. But I do for sure have two that I think are of the age to understand, and I worry about them. Um, but all we can do is pray, right? And talk to them and teach them. Okay, so moving on to today's subject. Like I said, it's pretty weird. So this is from The Guardian, and it's about a spyware called Pegasus. Dan Bongino is the one who brought this up as well. And this is how we heard about it. And this is what it does. Okay, so it's from the NSO Group software, can record your calls, copy your messages, and secretly film you. It is a name for perhaps the most powerful piece of spyware ever developed, certainly by a private company. Once it has wormed its way onto your phone without you noticing, it can turn it into a 24-hour surveillance device. It can copy messages you send or receive, harvest your photos, and record your calls. It might secretly film you through your phone's camera or activate the microphone to record your conversations. It can potentially pinpoint where you are, where you've been, and who you've met. Pegasus is the hacking software or spyware that is developed, marketed, and licensed to governments around the world by the Israeli company NSO Group. It has the capability to infect billions of phones running either iOS or Android operating systems. The earliest version of Pegasus discovered, which was captured by researchers in 2016, infected phones through what is called spear phishing text messages or emails that trick a target into clicking on a malicious link. This is exactly why you don't click on malicious links. If it looks weird or you're not expecting someone to send you a link to click on, don't. However, NSO's attack capabilities have become more advanced. Pegasus infections can be achieved through so-called zero-click attacks, which do not require any interaction from the phone's owner in order to succeed. These will often exploit zero-day vulnerabilities, which are flaws or bugs in an operating system that the mobile phone's manufacturer does not yet know about and so has not been able to fix. In 2019, WhatsApp revealed that NSO software had been used to send malware to more than 1,400 phones by exploiting a zero-day vulnerability. Simply by placing a WhatsApp call to a target device, malicious Pegasus code could be installed on the phone, even if the target never answered the call. More recently, NSO has begun exploiting vulnerabilities in Apple's iMessage software, giving it backdoor access to hundreds of millions of iPhones. Apple says it is continually updating its software to prevent such attacks. Technical understanding of Pegasus and how to find the evidential breadcrumbs it leaves on a phone after a successful infection has been improved by research conducted by Claudio Guar- Guarn- Guarna- Guarneri. Guarneri. I totally butchered that name. I'm sorry. I'm just going to call him Claudio, who runs Amnesty International's Berlin based security lab. So I am actually going to pull up what Amnesty International is really quickly. So, Amnesty International is an international non governmental organization with its headquarters in the United Kingdom focused on human rights. The organization says it has more than 7 million members and supporters around the world. Okay, so let's take a look at who they are real quick. We are funded by members and people like you. We are independent of any political ideology, economic interest, or religion. No government is beyond scrutiny. No situation is beyond hope. Few would have predicted when we started that torturers would become international outlaws, that most countries would abolish the death penalty, and seemingly untouchable dictators would be made to answer for their crimes. So it was in 1961, a British lawyer, Peter Benenson, was outraged when two Portuguese students were jailed just for raising a toast to freedom. He wrote an article in the Observer newspaper and launched a campaign that provoked an incredible response. Reprinted in newspapers across the world, his call to action sparked the idea that people everywhere can unite in solidarity for justice and freedom. This inspiring moment didn't just give birth to an extraordinary movement, it was the start of extraordinary social change. Only when the last prisoner of conscience has been freed, when the last torture chamber has been closed, when the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a reality for the world's people, will our work be done. So, over the years, human rights have moved from the fringes to center stage in world affairs. Amnesty has grown from seeking the release of political prisoners to upholding the whole spectrum of human rights. Our work protects and empowers people from abolishing the death penalty to protecting sexual and reproductive rights. I don't necessarily agree with those things but okay. And from combating a discrimination to defending refugees and migrants' rights. We speak out for anyone and everyone whose freedom and dignity are under threat. So, um, they do everything that has to do with human rights. That's fine because that's what they're working on here. They said things are becoming a lot more complicated for the targets to notice, said Claudio, who explained that NSO clients had largely abandoned suspicious SMS messages for more subtle zero-click attacks. For companies such as NSO, exploiting software that is either installed on devices by default, such as iMessage, or is very widely used, such as WhatsApp, is especially attractive because it dramatically increases the number of mobile phones Pegasus can successfully attack. As the technical partner of the Pegasus project, an international consortium of media organizations, including The Guardian, Amnesty's lab has discovered traces of successful attacks by Pegasus customers on iPhones running up to date versions of Apple's iOS. The attacks were carried out as recently as July 2021. So, as of this month, they are attacking people's phones. Forensic analysis, by the way, just so you know, this is completely illegal. It is absolutely illegal to spy on an American citizen. That is against the law. Forensic analysis of the phones of victims has also identified evidence suggesting NSO's constant search for weaknesses may have expanded to other commonplace apps. In some of the cases analyzed by Claudio and his team, peculiar network traffic relating to Apple's photos and music apps can be seen at the times of the infections, suggesting NSO may have begun leveraging new vulnerabilities. Where neither spear phishing nor zero click attacks succeed, Pegasus can also be installed over a wireless transceiver located near a target, or according to an NSO brochure, simply manually installed if an agent can steal the target's phone. Once installed on a phone, Pegasus can harvest more or less any information or extract any file. SMS messages, address books, call history, calendars, emails, and internet browsing histories can all be exfiltrated. So the attack vector, so it can be installed on a phone through vulnerabilities in common apps, or by tricking a target into clicking a malicious link. This is just a picture of what it can do, and they can, like they said, the SMS, text, emails, WhatsApp chats, photos, and videos. They can activate your microphone or your camera. They can record your calls. They can use your GPS data to locate where you are, where you've been. They can get access to your calendar, your contact book, all of that information. When an iPhone is compromised, it's done in such a way that allows the attacker to obtain so called root privileges or administrative privileges on the device, said Claudio. Pegasus can do more than what the owner of the device can do. Lawyers for NSO claim that Amnesty International's technical report was conjecture, describing it as a compilation of speculative and baseless assumptions. However, they did not dispute any of its specific findings or conclusions. NSO has invested substantial effort in making its software difficult to detect, and Pegasus infections are now very hard to identify. Security researchers suspect more recent versions of Pegasus only ever inhabit the phone's temporary memory rather than its hard drive, meaning that once the phone is powered down, virtually all trace of the software vanishes. One of the most significant challenges that Pegasus represents to journalists and human rights defenders is the fact that the software exploits undiscovered vulnerabilities, meaning even the most security conscious mobile phone user cannot prevent an attack. This is a question that gets asked to me pretty much every time we do forensics with somebody. What can I do to stop this happening again? Said Claudio. The real honest answer is nothing. Now, I want to take a look at what exactly NSO is, right? So, what we know about the secretive company behind the Pegasus spy software. This was written on July 20th. I keep forgetting to give credit. This is by Grace Woodruff. So the Israeli technology firm NSO Group has become notorious for its impressively sneaky and effective spyware called Pegasus, and the laundry list of controversies involving how that software has been used in a recently released investigation has sparked a new one this week. But how much do we really know about the company that's behind Pegasus? NSO Group first came under major scrutiny for their surveillance technology in 2016 when analysis by the NGO Citizen Lab and Lookout Mobile Security discovered that the firm had exploited 0 days unpatched security vulnerabilities on Apple's iOS. All it took was one click of a link sent through a text message for Pegasus to be installed on a user's phone. Once on the phone, Pegasus enables keystroke monitoring of all communications, as well as enabling Pegasus operators to remotely record audio and video using the hacked phone's camera and microphone. The discovery of Pegasus spyware on the phone of United Arab Emirates human rights activist Ahmad Mansour highlighted the ability of governments to abuse Pegasus by targeting political dissidents rather than terrorists and serious criminals. Since 2016, NSO faced multiple accusations that Pegasus is being used to target journalists and activists around the world. These include Mexican journalist Rafael Cabrera, Lab's own reporters, and the family of murdered Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, among others. And I've talked about Jamal Khashoggi in one of my earlier episodes. The most recent addition to this list of Pegasus targets is actually 50,000 additions. Reporting consortium, the Pegasus Project, released a report on Sunday that found a list of over 50,000 phone numbers that they believe were identified as people of interest by clients of NSO. Ostensibly, Pegasus is supposed to be used only to investigate terrorism and crime and leaves no traces whatsoever on the hacked device, which makes it nearly impossible to detect once it's installed. However, a forensic methodology report by Amnesty International finds that neither statement is true. The report uncovers widespread, persistent, and ongoing unlawful surveillance and human rights abuses that NSO spyware perpetrated on human rights activists, journalists, academics, and government officials across the globe. NSO was founded in 2010. Pegasus was introduced sometime between then and 2016, but that's really all we know about its creation, partially because NSO has tended to de emphasize Pegasus in its marketing and instead emphasizes their range of products: anti drone, data analytics, search and rescue, and even COVID tracking technologies. NSO Groups has been notoriously secretive, releasing little to no information regarding their operations, customers, or safeguards against misuse. In 2016, when NSO first came under scrutiny for the Pegasus targeting of Mansour, the firm did not even have a website. In February of 2019, Francisco Partners, a U.S. private equity fund, sold NSO Group to the firm's Israeli co-founders Omri Labi and Shalev Julio, who partnered with Novelpina Capital to purchase a majority stake in NSO. NSO Group's previous owners, Francisco Partners, bought the company in 2014 for $130 million. In 2019, it was valued at over $1 billion. Novalpina, Lobby, and Julio declared that as the new majority stakeholders of NSO Group, they were committing themselves to more transparency and pledged to do whatever is necessary to prevent their technology being used to abuse human rights. The cornerstone of NSO Group's human rights policy is a vetting process in which NSO staff examine governments who hope to acquire the firm's technology, looking at the country's human rights record, its relationship to Israel, and the level of need for the surveillance tool. NSO claims to have passed on $300 million in sales opportunities as a result of their human rights review processes. However, as MIT Technology Review reported in August 2020, it's completely possible for a country with a poor human rights record to acquire Pegasus. Morocco's worsening record on human rights was outweighed by the country's history of cooperation with Israel and its critical terrorism problem, so the sale was approved. NSO licenses Pegasus to governments in 40 undisclosed countries and has long maintained they do not operate the systems once sold to their clients, nor do they have access to the data of their clients' targets. This is the defense that the firm returns to time and again when reports surface that their Pegasus technology has been used as a tool of oppression and violence. NSO states firmly that they will terminate their contract with any clients who abuse the technology. The company cites 3 instances of clients abusing Pegasus and subsequently having their contract terminated as evidence of NSO's willingness to shut down abuse. There are other guardrails in place once Pegasus is sold to a client, which include prohibiting U.S. phones from being infected with the spyware. Pegasus is supposed to self destruct if it finds itself within American borders. And though ad hoc teams are created to investigate when reports of abuse arise, there is reportedly no permanent internal team tasked with investigating and handling abuse. NSO and their technologies are regulated by the export control authorities from the 3 countries from which their products are exported: Bulgaria, Cyprus, and Israel. Yet, because NSO repeatedly asserts that any misuse of the technology is done at the hands of the clients rather than the company, it can be difficult to pinpoint where an abuse is coming from and who should be held accountable, as has been the case regarding a lawsuit brought by Facebook WhatsApp against NSO. Despite NSO's self-proclaimed unprecedented step forward in the form of their recently released Transparency and Responsibility Report, there remains a lot that is unclear. Amnesty International points to the lack of accountability in the report for the unlawful surveillance of journalists and activists, the company's refusal to acknowledge how their own policies have denied the right to remedy for victims of Pegasus unlawful spying, as well as NSO's failures to disclose all the legal challenges the company has faced resulting from the misuse of its technology. Amnesty, UN surveillance experts, and Edward Snowden, among others, are now calling for a global moratorium on the sale of not only NSO spyware like Pegasus, but all surveillance technology under proper rules and regulations can be put in place internationally. So this is that's what NSO does. Um, Apparently there is this article here that tells you if the NSO's Pegasus spyware targeted your phone. So I was curious into looking into this to see if that's possible. This is from TechCrunch.com by Zach Whitaker. So, over the weekend, an international consortium of news outlets reported that several authoritarian governments, including Mexico, Morocco, and the United Arab Emirates, used spyware developed by NSO Group to hack into the phones of thousands of their most vocal critics, including journalists, activists, politicians, and business executives. So, it seems as if right now we're not seeing anything that's happened in the U.S. so far, unless it has and we just don't know yet. A leaked list of 50,000 phone numbers of potential surveillance targets was obtained by Paris-based journalism nonprofit Forbidden Stories and Amnesty International and shared with the reporting consortium, including The Washington Post and The Guardian. Researchers analyzed the phones of dozens of victims to confirm they were targeted by the NSO's Pegasus spyware, which can access all of the data on a person's phone. The reports also confirm new details of the government customers themselves, which NSO Group closely guards. Hungary, a member of the European Union, where privacy from surveillance is supposed to be a fundamental right for its 500 million residents, is named as an NSO customer. So, see, even Hungary is not supposed to be able to spy on their citizens, but they sold this technology to them anyway. The reporting shows for the first time how many individuals are likely targets of NSO's intrusive device level surveillance. Previous reporting had put the number of known victims in the hundreds or more than 1,000. NSO Group sharply rejected the claims. NSO has long said that it doesn't know who its customers target, which it reiterated in a statement to TechCrunch on Monday. Researchers at Amnesty, whose work was reviewed by the Citizen Lab at the University of Toronto, found that NSO can deliver Pegasus by sending a victim a link which when opened infects the phone, or silently and without any interaction at all through a zero-click exploit, which takes advantage of vulnerabilities in the iPhone software. Citizen Lab researcher Bill Marczak said in a tweet that NSO Zero Clicks worked on iOS 14.6, which until today was the most up-to-date version. Amnesty's researchers showed their work by publishing meticulously detailed technical notes and a toolkit that they said may help others identify if their phones have been targeted by Pegasus. The Mobile Verification Toolkit, or MVT, works on both iPhones and Android devices, but slightly differently. Amnesty said that more forensic traces were found on iPhones than Android devices, which makes it easier to detect on iPhones. MVT will let you take an entire iPhone backup or a full system dump if you jailbreak your phone and feed in for your any indicators of compromise, or IOCs, known to be used by NSO to deliver Pegasus, such as domain names used in NSO's infrastructure that might be sent by text message or email. If you have an encrypted iPhone backup, you can also use MVT to decrypt your backup without having to make a whole new copy. So this picture here is the terminal output from the MVT toolkit, which scans iPhone and Android backup files for indicators of compromise. Okay, so the toolkit works on the command line. So it's not a refined and polished user experience and requires some basic knowledge of how to navigate the terminal. We got it working in about 10 minutes, plus the time to create a fresh backup of an iPhone, which you will want to do if you want to check up to the hour. To get the toolkit ready to scan your phone for signs of Pegasus, you'll need to feed in Amnesty's IOCs, which it has on its GitHub page. Anytime the indicators of compromised file updates, download and use an up-to-date copy. Once you set off the process, the toolkit scans your iPhone backup file for any evidence of compromise. The process took about a minute or two to run and spit out several files in a folder with the results of the scan. If the toolkit finds a possible compromise, it will say so in the outputted files. In our case, we got one detection, which turned out to be a false positive and has been removed from the IOCs after we checked with the Amnesty researchers. A new scan using the updated IOCs returned no signs of compromise. Given it's more difficult to detect an Android infection, MVT takes a similar but simpler approach by scanning your Android device backup for text messages with links to domains known to be used by NSO. The toolkit also lets you scan for potentially malicious applications installed on your device. The toolkit is, as command line tools go, relatively simple to use, though the project is open source, so it won't be long before someone will surely build a user interface for it. The project's detailed documentation will help you, as it did us. So let's see. I wonder, so MVT for Android, check an Android backup. If this is the first time you connect to this device, you will need to approve the authentication keys through a prompt that will appear on your Android device. Then you can use ADB to extract the backup for SMS only with the following command. You will need to approve the backup on the phone and potentially enter a password to encrypt the backup. The backup then will be stored in a file named backup.ab. You will need to use Android Backup Extractor to convert it to a readable file format. Make sure that Java is installed on your system and use the following command. Okay, so go to mvt-docs.readthedocs.io, and this will tell you how to do the MVT for your iOS and for your Android. Okay, you can check for Android backup, you can check APKs, and Android forensic methodology talks about that. And then for iOS, you can install Libby mobile device. Um, these utilities will become useful when extracting crash logs and generating iTunes backups. You can check for iTunes backups, and you can also check with backup with MBT iOS, and you can check a file system dump. So you can dump the file system, and you can do all that, and you can record extracted MVT iOS. Okay, so I don't understand any of this. This is all foreign language to me. So if anybody does understand this and goes and looks at it, maybe you could email me, gotta say something 21 at gmail.com, and explain to me how I would check my phone. I have an Android. I'd like to know how I could check it because I'm very confused. However, I'm going to favorite this to my computer so I don't lose it. Anyway, so The Guardian turns the spotlight on spyware from NSO's ties to Israeli state. I don't know what this means. But back in 2017, few would have disputed that Israel and Saudi Arabia were regional foes. Officially, the countries had no diplomatic ties. Yet, for a small group of Israeli business people attending secret meetings with Saudi officials in Vienna, Cyprus, and is it Riyadh? That summer, there were signs relations were warming. The business people represented NSO Group. Their mission was to sell the Saudis NSO's weapons-grade spyware system, Pegasus. According to a person who attended the meeting in June 2017 in Cyprus, a senior Saudi intelligence official was amazed by what he saw. After a lengthy and technical discussion, the Saudi spy, who had brought a new iPhone, was shown how Pegasus could infect the phone and then be used to remotely operate its camera. You don't need to understand the language to see they were amazed and excited, and that they saw what they needed to. NSO Group had been given explicit permission by the Israeli government to try to sell the homegrown hacking tools to the Saudis. It was a classified arrangement and resulted in the sale later being sealed in uh, Riyadh in a deal reportedly worth at least $55 million. In Israel, there is a strong political movement to make diplomacy through business, said the person speaking on the condition of anonymity. Business first, diplomacy later. When you make a deal together, it opens a lot of doors to diplomacy. It is common for governments to help companies export their products. NSO, after all, employs former Israeli cyber intelligence officials and retains links to the defense ministry. But revelations about how repressive states such as Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Azerbaijan, and others have used NSO's technology to target human rights lawyers, activists, and journalists raise questions for Israel and have put the issue under fresh scrutiny. The disclosures threaten to put diplomatic pressure on Israel amid questions over whether it is using the licensing of NSO spyware for political leverage and allowing the software to be sold to undemocratic countries that are likely to misuse it. A recent transparency report released by NSO Group acknowledged the company was closely regulated by export control authorities in Israel. The Defense Export Controls Agency, or DECA, within the Israeli Defense Ministry, strictly restricts the licensing of some surveillance products based on its own analysis of potential customers from a human rights perspective, the company said, and have rejected NSO requests for export license in quite a few cases. Moreover, NSO was also subject to an in-depth regulatory review by Israel on top of its own robust internal framework. Within NSO, the process Israel uses to assess whether countries can be sold the technology is considered a state secret. A person familiar with the process said officials in both Israel's National Security Council and Prime Minister's office have been known to give their input. In the case of Saudi Arabia, sources familiar with the matter said the kingdom was temporarily cut off from using Pegasus in 2018 for several months following the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, but was allowed to begin using the spyware again in 2019 following the intervention of the Israeli government. It is unclear why the Israeli government urged NSO to reconnect the surveillance tool for Riyadh. However, the 10 countries that the forensic analysis for the Pegasus project suggests have actually been abusing the technology all enjoy trade relations with Israel or have diplomatic ties with the country that have been improving markedly in recent years. In two NSO client countries, India and Hungary, it appears governments began using the company's technology as or after their respective prime ministers met then Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in high profile encounters intended to boost trade and security cooperation. It is understood no countries that are considered enemies of Israel, such as Turkey, have been allowed to buy NSO's wares. Markets dictate what works. I don't dictate. The only place I have actually intervened is cybersecurity, Netanyahu said in a press conference in Hungary in 2017 as he stood next to the country's Prime Minister Viktor Orban. What remains unclear is whether Israel's intelligence agencies might have special privileges with NSO, such as access to surveillance material gathered using its spyware. One person close to the company, who asked to remain anonymous, said it was a frequent topic of speculation. Asked whether Israel could access intelligence gathered by NSO clients, they replied, "The Americans think so." That view was supported by current and former U.S. intelligence officials who told the Washington Post, a partner in the Pegasus project, that there was a presumption that Israel had some access via a backdoor to intelligence unearthed via such surveillance tools. John Scott Railton, a senior researcher at the Citizen Lab at the University of Toronto, said he believed it would be irresponsible for a state to allow the large-scale distribution of a powerful surveillance tool such as Pegasus without being able to keep an eye on what was being done with it. He said court records had revealed that NSO used servers that were not always located on the premises of the client. What that means is there's the potential for visibility, and it would be crazy for them, the Israelis, not to have visibility, he said. NSO strongly denied that Israel had any access to its customers' systems. NSO Group is a private company. It is not a tool of Israeli diplomacy. It is not a backdoor for Israeli intelligence, and it does not take direction from any government leader, NSO's lawyer said. In a statement, the Israeli Ministry of Defense said Israel marketed and exported cyber products in accordance with its 2007 Defense Export Control Act, and that policy decisions take national security and strategic considerations into account, which include adherence to international arrangements. As a matter of policy, the State of Israel approves the export of cyber products exclusively to governmental entities for lawful use and only for the purpose of preventing and investigating crime and counterterrorism under end user certificates provided by the acquiring government, the ministry said. It said appropriate measures were taken in cases where exported items are used in violation of export licenses. The ministry added Israel does not have access to the information gathered by NSO's clients. For Israel, few clients whom it has approved to use Pegasus have been as problematic as Saudi. Weeks ago, NSO cut the kingdom off once more following allegations that Saudi had used Pegasus to attack tons of Al Jazeera journalists. Saudi Arabia declined to comment. So, Saudi Arabia has been cut off for a second time from using the spyware. And you wonder, why did they sell it to them in the first place? I think this is something that's seriously it's a problem. So while it doesn't seem that it's been given to the American government, as far as we know, no one's reporting on it. I will look into that. So as far as we know, it's not being used here in America. But how long before our government tries to purchase that spyware and use it? Because the NSA is already allegedly spying on Tucker Carlson. So, how long before they acquire this type of spyware so they can spy on any dissident that they don't like and use it as political persecution, right? So, this is a very serious thing, and it's something that we should definitely be talking about. I would suggest already getting in touch with your local representatives and senators, and even your state representatives and senators, and letting them know, hey, we know about Pegasus spyware. As of now, we don't think that it's being used in America, but we should be, instead of waiting for it to happen and then fighting against it, we should be designing something that prevents it from ever being able to be used here in the first place. Get a jump start on it, get ahead of it before it happens. So many times we let things happen and then we try to fight it and it's too late. We need to fight now before it ever starts. Because this could be really dangerous. I'm just going to leave the episode here. Go in and do some research of this for yourself. Um, it's a very serious subject, and we need to be on top of it. All right, so be very and go to that other website that'll tell you how to check your phone to see if it has been infected or not. I'm going to do that as soon as I can figure out what it says. Anyway, I hope you have a good rest of your day. Please join me on my Facebook, Lauren Collins. I just got to say something. You can email me, gotta say something 21 at gmail.com. Join my subreddit, r slash just gotta say something. And also, please don't forget, Saturday, check out the Scott Ford Show. That's the episode that I will be on, and we have a really great conversation, I think. So check that one out. Subscribe to his show. Go check out Isaac Hayes, the Cajun Conservative, and his Christian podcast, Brothers Just Searching. They just started doing that on Facebook Live and YouTube, so it's really good. And I've been watching. I watched their first episode. It's the Book of Daniel series. They're going to talk about the statue. I talked about that in my Bible prophecy episodes. So check them out. And the Armed Lutheran and TV's Rob is Unwoke. Great people. I know that you'll love them. If you like to just listen to audio only, you can find me on Anchor, Spotify, Pandora, Google Podcasts, Stitcher. Please subscribe to the podcast, leave me a rating, anything like that. You can leave a review. And then on YouTube, please like and share this video. You can leave me a comment and I will reply. And also subscribe to the channel, please. Your support means so much. And also click the notification bell so you know every time that I upload a new video. And I hope you have a good rest of your day and have a great weekend. And I'll see you back here on Monday for the YouTube viewers, but on Friday for the podcast. Because if you're on YouTube, if you go to my podcast on Fridays, you get to enjoy a great book that I'm reading called Thy Kingdom Come. It's really great. We're going on to our third episode this Friday. Anyway, have a good rest of your day and God bless.